Dr. Mwinde. Daktari, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Elias and Dot. I'm glad to be here and to be your guest this month. And to our viewers who have logged in, I think Elias has just introduced myself, and I will not repeat much about what he has said. The next, we are going to get to know each other as we go through this important discussion this evening. I guess we have about 8 minutes to engage, interact, and exchange opinions and ideas. And I'll be using a presentation outline for purpose of this discussion. And I think to the viewers who have logged in, as I go through the different themes in the presentation, you could use the chat to post questions that you have. We'll look at them at the end, and then we'll have a bit of time to do question and answers. This is a subject I'm very passionate about. It's a subject I've written about, and my book was launched last year, May, and I think in under 8 months, in about 10 months, we have been able to sell over 1,000 copies. So what I'm discussing is also written and discussed in the book. So you'll allow me to go off camera so that it doesn't interfere with the presentation. And Dot, in case of anything, you could alert me on phone.
Yeah, sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you.
Yes. So in case of any interruptions, you could let me know through the phone because
Okay.
I want to mute the camera so that we don't take a lot of internet
That's
for
okay.
smooth presentation. Okay, thank you. So you'll allow me to go off camera, and then you'll confirm the slides are moving. So let me go to slide presentation. You're able to see the slide mode?
Yes.
Yes. I think that's fine.
They're moving, eh?
Yes.
They're moving.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this evening we'll be talking about your money and your wealth. And the objective here is for us to be able to become masters of our own finances. This personal finance is a subject that we all know about, because I think everybody who is of age and out, the moment you are 18 years and above, the expectation is that you should be able to earn your own livelihood, earn your own bread, take care of your bills and expenses. And all of us, at one point or the other, we deal with money. And I think this is one of the most difficult subjects to discuss about, because everybody has their own ideas about money and wealth. But as I'll be sharing shortly and using a bit of Kenyan data, I'll be demonstrating that personal finance is sometimes much complicated and much more difficult than we think it is. Sorry?
Yes. So members, I would kindly request that so we may need to remain muted when the presenter is trying to do the presentation. But let me try to mute a few people. Proceed. Thank you. Proceed, Daktari.
Okay. Sorry for that. So as I was saying, the reality of the data and the information that I'll be sharing, part of the data that I'll be sharing, it shows that personal finance is sometimes much more complicated than we think it is. And actually, many people just live at the primary level. They never get to accumulate wealth. They never get to grow beyond paying bills and expenses. And I think the question we'll be trying to answer tonight is, what can you do so that you go beyond the spending, where you're just at the primary level of buying and selling. The outline of my discussion will be a bit one question for the reflection, look at the Kenyan money troubles. We'll look at a bit of Kenyan data and see what is happening. Then I'll talk about money mindset. I'll mention something small about assets and abilities. Then I'll talk about investing, debt crisis, and the mystery of giving and enemies of money and wealth. And then at the end, I'll tie it with a few of the economic factors that affect how we generate and grow our wealth. Now, the first question that I want us to reply as I go through this question, and this should be a personal question, very personal to you, and I will kindly request that you ask yourself this question, and as I go through the presentation, you keep on reflecting on how you've answered this question. And the question I want to pose for each one of us is, what quality of life are you living today? And then what quality of life would you desire to have? This question is a bit weighty. It's very personal. And you can do an honest assessment about where you are and then where you want to go. Many people keep on dreaming about money. Many people keep on wishing or imagining they should have more money. But as I will show in this data, very few people ever get to the top. So when you talk about financial literacy, it is much more complex than many of us think. And most people spend their entire lives operating at the transactional level, where you simply earn a salary, you buy things, you pay your bills, and then you are stuck there. You do that 1 month, next month, 1 year, next year, and the year after. And many people operate that. And this is confirmed by this particular data. I've just picked a few data points in Kenya. Now, if you look at different sources of data, there are only about 7,200 dollar millionaires in Kenya. Yet, you see in our roads, there's a lot of opulence. You see big cars, you see big houses, you see all that. But the data is telling us people who have at least a net worth. Net worth is when you look at how much of your asset, you subtract your liabilities, and then you remove the houses you live in or the cars that you used for your personal uses. So when you remove those things, is what we call your net worth, according to how the global and international analysis of wealth is. We have only about $7,200 millionaires in Kenya. Dollar millionaires means that this person has a net worth of at least, at the current exchange rate, of about 130 million. So there are only about 7,200 people with that kind of money or with that kind of wealth in the country. Then I think this has been released from, I think, last month or last week. There's a lot of data that has come out from the online mobile applications. And data that is circulating right now in our public, in the mainstream media, social media, and all that, is that about 8 million Kenyans are active daily borrowers, meaning that every day there are about 8 million people who are borrowing money from the mobile apps, whether it's the apps for the banks or the others, the Tala, the branch, and all that. So we have about 8 million people who actively borrow every day. And the data that is coming out for 2024 is that Kenyans borrowed through those apps about 766 billion. So this is the money that was borrowed through mobile applications, whether the applications are done by the banks or the others. But this is not inclusive of money that was borrowed through mainstream bank or mainstream commercial institutions, the banks and the SACCOs and the others. So this is what is being borrowed through the apps. Now, the interesting part is why people are borrowing money. And many people are borrowing money to pay their utilities, either rent, electricity, water, buy food, and other basic things. But many more are borrowing to pay other loans. You find somebody has borrowed from one mobile app, and they are going to another mobile app to borrow to pay another app. And that is what normally we call the debt trap, where you can only pay debt by borrowing from another debt. There's also a bit of data that is showing which kind of people are using these mobile apps, who is borrowing. And here I've used Atlas, but mainly the data is saying these are the lower income people, the borders, the mama bogas, university students and college students are very active in this kind of borrowing. But then we have other silent borrowers. These are people who have pay slips. Either they have taken their loans within commercial banks or within their circles. Others use child loans. So there are many other people who are silent, in deep in debt, but they are not part of this data, because this data have only tried to track the people who are using the mobile apps. Now, there's a bit of mixed data on how many people have been listed by credit reference bureaus. You remember when the ASLA fund was being established, about 4.2 million people were removed from the credit listing, courtesy of the request of the president. But most of the data that is showing that about 3.85 million people have gone back to the listing. And the estimation is that between 19 and 21 million people and businesses, this includes people and businesses, have been listed in the Credit Reference Bureau as bad debt or as bad debtors. So this gives you the kind of picture about what is happening at the people finances and finances at the household and individual level. And this data is very depressing. So it means there are a lot of Kenyans who are in financial trouble. And what we'll be trying to answer is, how can you avoid this trap? Now, the first thing I will speak about money and wealth.
So maybe Dr.
Yes.
I was thinking that's a good question, and I was thinking if members would. I've just posted in the chat, like, what quality of life are you living? So if members would just type in the chat so that maybe you will review maybe at a later time. Thank you.
Yes.
Over from
Thank you for that. So when we talk about money, wealth, and poverty, what many people do not know is that first and foremost, this is a condition of your mind. It's actually a mind attitude. Most of the poor people remain poor because their mindsets are wrong. Many people, and especially most of the poor people or people in the low income, and actually even the middle class, they have a bad attitude or a bad interpretation of money. And that's why I normally say some people will tell you rich people are bad people. And when you have that kind of mindset, you can never attract money, because your mind cannot attract what you think is bad. So this idea that people say, oh, a lot of money is bad, or when people get money, they change and all that, that is a poverty mindset. And your mind cannot give you or cannot attract what you think is bad. So as you think, so you become. So when you have the right attitude of money, then you align yourself to attract and bring money to yourself. And then the other thing about money and wealth is that there's no way you can have more money than your capacity. Okay? Now, I'll put it this way. Many people, since they left school, they have never read anything, or they don't read anything other than when they are required to do an exam. Now, when it comes to the world of money, and if you check around some of the richest people in the world, they have also invested a lot in their knowledge. So you cannot grow beyond your capacity. So if you need money, you must expand your capacity. And I'm here to meet any rich person who does not invest in their own personal development. For example, this webinar has been on social media across many of our platforms. It has been on my platform, it has been on Dorte&Associates, it has been with Elias. We shared with many people, but many people have not logged. Okay, there are many people who have seen it and they have ignored it. There are many people who will not pay a single cent to attend a seminar. There are many people who will not pay a single cent to buy a book. There are many people who will pass an opportunity simply because they are required to pay an amount of money. Now, the people are looking for money and wealth, they see it differently. Every investment that you make in yourself is a factor that contributes to your growth and development. It's also a factor that contributes to your wealth. So if you're not expanding your capacity, you never get beyond what you have. And this is how it works. For example, if you have never thought about how somebody with $1 million not borrowed, looks like in the bank. For example, to just look at your bank statement and it has $1 million shillings. This is not money you have borrowed. This is not money you have stolen. This is your money. If you have never thought about how that looks like or how it feels to have such kind of money, or you have never thought about how it feels like to have 10 million in the bank, to just see yourself and you're saying, I have this kind of investment, I have this amount of money that I put somewhere. If you have never thought about that, you'll never see $1 million, you'll never see 10 million. So the amount of money that you accumulate is first and foremost conceived in your mind. Think about it. All the things that you see around, the cars that you're driving, the phones that you're using, were once ideas in somebody's mind. And then once they were conceived in the mind, they were eventually translated into reality. That's exactly how money looks like, or how money works. So the amount of money and wealth that you want, you must first conceive it in your mind. And the moment you conceive it in your mind, do not worry how it will come. If you conceive it and you have faith, and then you contribute and work towards that, somehow the universe and nature will align things and it will come to you. So the attitude of the rich is quite different from the attitude and the mindsets of the poor. So you need to have the right mindset first and foremost if you seek to grow wealth. The other thing I need to speak about is your relationship with money. Now, it's a bit different to accumulate money, but it's very different when you are hoarding money. There are people, growing wealth does not mean that you are mean. Growing wealth means that you have a healthy relationship with money. And we normally look at it this way. You also need to start thinking about your personal GDP. You look at the Kenyan economy, we talk about the gross domestic product for the Republic of Kenya. But you, at your personal level, you must also be thinking about what is my personal gross domestic product? How does money come to me? Where does it go? Then how much is left? So you need to start having this relationship. You are seeing money as a tool, not something to hold. So when you're saying about you need to grow your wealth, we don't mean that you become mean or you do not spend on yourself or you do not enjoy life for that matter. What we are trying to say is you need to have a healthy relationship where money comes to you, it moves to the right places, and part of the money is retained to grow and develop and help you improve your net worth or your balance sheet. So this is the kind of thing that we are talking about, and you need to first and foremost have the right attitude about money. Now, the next thing I will need to speak about is about assets and liabilities. Now, there's a big difference between assets and liabilities in the when you are doing things like insurance and even in the business world and in our personal lives. So there's a bit of difference when you talk about assets and liabilities. Now, for many of us, we confuse the two, and then we confuse our items in our houses to be assets when in reality they are not assets. Now, I'll just give the basic definition of what assets are so that you can know what you need to put your effort on. Now, you can never grow wealth without creating assets. And what we call assets, from a personal development point of view, is anything that you own that brings cash in the future. So do not look at the complicated definitions of accounting and all that. The basic definition or the threshold of what you can call your asset, if you check your house or you check around you or you check the things that you own, you need to ask yourself, which of the things that I own brings cash? Either tomorrow, next month, or the month after. This is not about your salary. Your salary is not an asset because you must work to get your salary. Now, I've also seen people confuse being in assets. So if, for example, you have a business, you're a business person and you wake up and you go to your business, and that's where you get your income, that is active income. You must go to the business or you must work in the business for the business to bring that income. In other cases, we have many people who are running businesses, but the businesses do not pay them anything. So there are people who do business, and then all they do is just to spend their time there, and they never draw a salary from the business. So if you're involved in such kind of a business, you cannot call that an investment. And if your business does not pay you a salary, then it has not qualified to get to the class of a business. But that still income that you must work for. Now, when you talk about assets, these are things that you create, and then they start working on their own to bring you cash flows in the future. That future can be next week, it can be next month, it can be next year, it can be 5 years from now. But the bottom line is that which you own that brings you money without you doing anything or being involved, what most of the time we call passive incomes, then they qualify to be assets. And I've just given some good examples. For example, if you're fixed accounts, fixed deposit, your bank's savings account that generates some interest, that's a low-class form of asset, but it brings some interest or some income. If you have investment like treasury bills and bonds, these are the government borrowings. When the government issues bills and bonds, the bills are issued every week. There's an auction. The bonds are issued on a regular basis. The difference between bills and bonds is the maturity period. Bills are 1 year and less. The bonds are 1 year and beyond. But what bills and bonds do, they earn you interest in the future. So the moment you invest in those bills and bonds, then you simply wait for the cash to come in. You can buy stocks. Now, stocks normally pay in terms of dividends or capital gains. Where you buy stock at a cheap price, then it grows price in the stock market, or you wait for it to pay you dividends. And then when you're choosing between stocks and stocks, you need to check what do you want. Do you want to grow capital gains? Do you want to get dividends? There are certain companies that do not pay dividends, but the shares grow. There are other companies that pay dividends and shares grow. But when it comes to stocks, it's unlike the fixed deposits and the treasury bills. Stocks do not preserve the capital, meaning that you can buy today's share at 10 shillings and tomorrow it will be 5 shillings, meaning that your capital can be wiped out or lost. The other assets like be commercial rentals. And here I'm a bit careful when I talk about real estate, in particularly, for example, for the Kenyan market. When you have commercial buildings, these are buildings that you're using for rental, or you have bought land that is supposed to appreciate in value, or you bought land and you're speculating, expecting to gain in value, then those becomes assets if they're going to increase in value. Now, I'm a bit careful not to talk about the house you live in, because I will talk about it next shortly. Because the houses we live in, when you're buying your insurance, you are told they are assets, but in reality, they are not. And I will cover that shortly. The same case about your car, the car that you use to move around. If it's not a commercial vehicle, you need to be careful when you are defining it as an asset. Now, on the other side is the liabilities. Liabilities, in the simplest form of divination, or the simplest form to understand liabilities, they are those things that eat your cash or your assets in the future, meaning that you require to spend cash to pay them, and you have already incurred them. For example, when you take a loan, you start being deducted cash either from your salary or from your business, and you need to repay that loan. So that cash movement means that you already acquired a liability. So when you took the loan, it became a liability, and then on a regular basis, you'll be required to pay it. And you need to spend cash to pay that. If you don't have the cash to pay, then the banks or the lenders will come for you. When you take things on credit, maybe you buy your consumables on credit. You passed through the shop, you took your groceries, you didn't pay for them, or you passed through the shop, your shopkeeper gave you your foodstuffs, you didn't pay for it. Those are liabilities. Or sometimes when you use hire purchase, you pick things and then you are required to pay on a regular basis. So these are good examples of liabilities. Now, the difference between assets and liabilities is that assets create wealth. So when you accumulate, they help you to create your wealth. On the other side, when you take bad liabilities, and I'm careful when I talk about bad liabilities, for example, certain loans are bad loans. There are certain loans that you can take and they're advantageous or they help you, but there are certain loans that we take and they are bad loans. Those ones destroy your wealth. And I was mentioning about leverage shortly. So the difference between assets, they help you create wealth. Liabilities take away your wealth if, for example, they are bad. Now, let me talk about the houses and the cars that you drive and you own, and other things that we think are measures for. Now, even when you look at the definition I was talking about, people who are dollar millionaires and all that, when they're doing that computation, the house that you live in, it really doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter how expensive it is. it doesn't qualify to be an asset. So whether you spent 100 million, whether you spent 20 million, it doesn't matter how much you spent, as long as you're living in that house and it doesn't generate cash flows, then that house I normally call it a lifestyle choice. So whether you have owned the house or whether it's rental, it is still serving the same purpose. So the house we live in, the cars we use for our own movement, the clothes you wear, whether they are designer clothes or whatever they are, the places you go out to dine, they are not measures of wealth. I call them lifestyle choices. For example, when I go to the office, I can choose to drive, I can choose to use a matatu, I can choose to use a taxi, I can even choose to walk. Now, that choice at that point is purely a lifestyle choice. It has nothing to do with my wealth. But even when I choose to drive, the type of car that I choose to drive is purely a lifestyle choice. Whether I use a Pitts, I use a Land Cruiser, I use a Mercedes, that's purely a lifestyle choice. It's not a measure of wealth. So let's not attach things that we have in our houses or things that we use for our basic needs and for our luxury. Let's not confuse them with assets, and let's not confuse them as measures of wealth. So regardless of what you or how much you spend on such things, if you look at the Maslow hierarchy of needs, you are still operating at the basic level, because the basic needs for a human being is food, clothing, and shelter. So it really doesn't matter how much you spend on those things, but as long as you are still either buying food or you're getting shelter or you are getting clothing, it is not a measure of wealth. It is a lifestyle choice. So I'm not saying they are bad. Please, if you can afford it, enjoy it. But becomes bad when you need to use debt or to use income that you do not have to acquire such things. Now, for the rich people, and this is where we need to start being careful. Rich people, for example, people who can, some of the richest people we have around, when they buy such items, to them it is very cheap compared to their net worth. So it doesn't mean that you'll not get to live in those neighborhoods where they live, but you need to be asking yourself, where I'm living, the type of house I have, the type of car that I'm driving, how much am I spending on it relative to what I have or to what income my assets are generating. So I'm not saying that you should not enjoy life. That's not the case here. What I'm trying to say, you need to distinguish between when you're acquiring assets, when you're acquiring liabilities, and when you're spending on lifestyle choices. So the lifestyle choices, they are largely to meet your basic human needs. So enjoy life when you can, but do not confuse it with wealth. Now, I'll speak shortly about investing. There are many ways of creating wealth. And in social media, I've seen people try to mix investments, business, and returns. For example, there's something that I've been trading on X where people say, I put my million in a government bond that pays me 10% because I can use that million to do business and make more than that. Now, that's a mix-up of the principles. So the concepts are very different. If, for example, you use the million to do business to generate more, that is a different class of income or a different type of investment compared to the person who put the million in a government bond and earned the 10%. Now, the person who put the money in the government bond, they created a passive income. Okay? The person who is doing business is in active income, meaning that the business, they have to work on the business for the business to pay you that return. So it's a mix-up to draw such a comparative. So when you're trying to do investments, it's very important to understand exactly what you're doing. Now, the current world we are living in, there are unlimited types of investments. The modern economic system, unlike the economic systems of our forefathers, where they were restricted on the things where they could do the investments, in modern economic system, we have quite a lot of options and choices. For example, in Kenya, you can do investment, you can create financial assets. Financial assets like the bills, the bonds, the fixed deposits. The people even who invest on Forex, they are the special funds, the Mansa X, the Hawk, and all the other types of investment that you've seen around. So there are quite a lot of financial assets that you can invest in. You can also invest in real estate, like now the commercial buildings. And I think this is what most Kenyans are in. Many Kenyans think that the only type of investment or the best investment we have is owning and building. But the truth is, if you look at the Kenyan economy, there are many, many, many other better investment alternatives on top of real estate. You can also have articles that, like now you've heard that certain people buy gold and they wait for it to go up, or other articles of value like silver and other things. Or there are people who invest in arts. These are like the things that are found in museums, these things that are rare. So these are kind of sophisticated kind of investments. So the modern economic system gives us unlimited number of opportunities. But even right now with global interconnectedness, you can access other economies. Like you can be in Kenya and you do investments in the US. You can be in Kenya and do investment in the UK. You can be in Kenya and do investment in Asia, China, Singapore, Australia, and all these. So right now, with the current economic integration, there are quite a lot of unlimited investment alternatives. Now, the choice is normally between where you are, at what level are you in. Now, when you are beginning, we normally encourage people to go for investment that preserve your capital and then give you a decent return. This is when you're beginning and you're trying to build your portfolio, you need to start at a safe space where you don't lose the capital money. But also there are people who are a bit aggressive, who want to start high, also depending on your age. So the younger you are, probably the more you can be a bit aggressive in your investment. But in your later years, for example, you already have children in school, you are moving towards your retirement, the later years, you become a bit limited on where you can put your money. But the rule of the thumb is, even when you are young, you need to do a bit of what preserves the capital. For example, when I go and buy a treasury bill or a bond for 1 million, my million will be returned eventually. For example, I bought a bond for 5 years. After the end of 5 years, my 1 million will be preserved, but I will have earned interest every 6 months for the 5 years that I invested. But my 1 million will still be preserved. So we encourage a lot to start with a bit of investment that preserve your capital, and then you start becoming more aggressive with time based on how much your wealth is growing. So the more wealth you have, or the more money you have to play around with, the better you are placed to play around with different classes of investments. But also, I've talked about balancing between liquidity and capital gains. Now, let me clarify what liquidity is. Liquidity is investment that brings cash in on a regular basis. Now, capital gains, for example, when I buy a plot for speculation, I put my, say, 3 million in that plot. Until I sell that plot, I will not get my cash flow. Okay? So if I bought the plot for 3 million, and I will only make a profit out of it when I sell it, maybe at 5 million or 4 million. So there's a bit of time in between. So I can have the asset, but it is not bringing anything until I sell it. So you need to be able to classify your investment based on this kind of cash flows, how the cash flows come in. So many people end up tying all their money in plots that are not generating cash flows. And then there's a catch in there that I will talk about it shortly. If you put your investment in certain assets, it means that you can only realize the gain once you dispose the asset. But also you need assets that bring cash flow on a regular basis. And that's why I'm saying like the fixed investments, like the bonds and the bills, they bring cash flow on a regular basis. And there's a certain advantage around that I will speak about it shortly. So it's very important to distinguish between investments that you must work in, or where you are still having where you must work, and then where you have your assets generating income. So you need to be able to distinguish between the two. Now, the things that I'm talking about when you're talking about investments, there's something we call compounding. Now, when we talk about wealth creation, the biggest factor of wealth is compounding. Okay? Now, when you talk about compounding, we are saying, for example, I'll put my 1 million in a treasury bill or a treasury bond. After 6 months, I get interest of, say, 50,000. After another 6 months, I get another interest of 50,000. So in the year, I'll have gotten interest of, say, 100,000. Now, the compounding part of it is, what do I do with the interest? Many of us eat the interest. Now, when you eat the interest, it means that by the time you get your final year and the money is returned to you, your million will still be million, because they will still return the million. You have already eaten the interest. Now, that is not compounding. Compounding is when I get my 50,000, I put it back, either in another bond. When I get my other 50,000, I put it back. So that means that if, for example, I started with a million this year, and I've earned 100,000. By next year, I've invested back the 100,000. So I don't have 1 million, I have 1.1 million working for me. Then the following year, I will start earning interest on my original million and then the 100,000. So that is what we call compounding. Now, wealth is created in compounding. And this is when you start talking about money working for you. So the simple explanation of compounding is that when you create your asset, which I'll call the mother, when the mother gives birth to a child, you don't eat the child. You put the child back to start working for you. Then when the child gives birth to a grandchild, you also don't eat the grandchild. You put them back. So when you talk about compounding, it's how much you're able to turn back your money and grow that money back until it is working for you. So eventually the people who grow a lot of wealth is when they compound and get a lot of money working for them. And over time, because compounding works with time, over time, you'll have more money working for you, generating more money that you can ever finish. And this is what the wealth people do. They have assets, they have money, and their money is generating more money than can ever finish, regardless of which lifestyle they live in. So you find the rich people, like when they buy a house for 100 million or 200 million, that house is very cheap compared to how much their money is generating. So this is normally a factor of time, and this is the greatest secret if you are seeking wealth. You must understand the principle and the concept of compounding. Now, compounding multiplies faster than what you can save. So those of us who are doing savings, the compounding factor works faster than the savings that you're doing. So if, for example, I save my money, I save and invest for 5 years, by the time of my 5th year, you'll find that the interest of the interest of the interest is actually more than what I've been able to save personally. And that's why I say this is the biggest secret of wealth. Now, for many people, and I think this is something that we need to demystify, especially for the Kenyan context. Many of us have been meant to believe that land is the only place that you can make money or where there is wealth. Now, this is not entirely true. There are many, many other investments. And when we buy land, for many Kenyans, we buy it out of cultural attachments. Land has cultural connotations in Kenya. Many of us grew up believing that you must own a piece of land, you must own a house somewhere and all that. Now, when you come to the principle of wealth, your cultural attitudes and attributes do not matter. What you do when you're doing investment and when you're creating wealth, you evaluate your investment based on what the investment is bringing, not your personal or emotional attachment. So for you to create wealth, you need to dispose your emotions or your cultural values from the investment itself. I think, like, for example, I can use the example of the Kikuyu community when they buy land, Manguta assumes that when you buy land, you can only make money. It ignores the component of risk. So it's not true that you cannot go wrong on land. Like, for example, you might buy a piece of land and you buy it at the point where it's at its peak price. And when you buy it at its peak price, it means that it is no longer going to get capital gains, or it is going to take much too long to get a capital gain, compared to if you had put that money, for example, even in a single treasury bill and started compounding. So it's very important to invest. I'm not saying land is bad. I'm not saying real estate is bad, but it's better to evaluate the return, what you're getting, what gain are you getting in that investment. And then you also need to know at what stage are you in the investment. Eventually, all the rich people get to invest in real estate and property, but it might not be the best place to start with, especially in the Kenyan context. Now, I'll come to this question of the debt crisis. I've already talked about it. I shared it at the beginning. Now, debt is a big problem in this country, and many people, even the people people who are working, they are silently drowning in debt. Now, when we talk about debt, there is good debt and bad debt. So it's not true that every time you need to develop and grow. And I've had people tell me quite a lot of this. How will you ever develop without debt? That is not true. Now, the problem with debt is that, the good thing about debt is only if you can use it to do a project that makes profit. So the original design of debt is to create what we call in finance language leverage. Leverage is if I have a good idea or a good project and I know I will make a profit out of that project and I do not have the cash. So I go to somebody who has the cash, I borrow their cash, I invest that cash, the project makes a profit, and then I pay back the loan together with all its costs, and then I'm left with a profit. So that is what we call leverage. Leverage is only when you are able to use somebody's money for a profit. Now, when you do things like consumables in your house, if you're buying like furniture, even mortgage, you're putting it on the house you live in. And I said the house you live in is not really an asset. So you find that the kind of interest and the expense you're spending on those kind of loans start putting you to what you call poverty tax. For example, if I borrow money to go and buy my food tonight, I'll have borrowed, say, 500 shillings. But the person I borrow that money charges me interest. So while other people are spending 500 shillings to get the same amount of food, me, I will not be spending 500 because I'll be spending the 500 plus the interest. And that's what we start calling poverty tax, meaning that you're being charged interest to pay the same things that other people who can afford them without loans are paying. And that's what I'm saying we need to be very careful. Now, let me talk about bad and good debts. I said good debt is only when you can live rent. Now, the debt that you're using for your personal items, I talked about mortgage, I talked about furniture in your house, I talked about household items. Some of us take loans to go for holidays, others to do weddings and all that. In terms of financial evaluation and in terms of understanding about investments, then those become or they tend towards bad debts because you start being charged interest to pay the same things that other people are not paying interest on. And actually, that's a big contributor to poverty, especially for the people in the low income and the middle class. So when you're borrowing and taking loans to pay things that other people are not able to take loan, then they start pushing you. You start living at spending more than what other people are spending. Now, the other thing about those of us who are working and employed, now, many of us commit our payslip to the end, meaning that many of us are only being protected by the law that says that you cannot be deducted more than 2/3 of your income. Now, when you're talking about good debt practice, and especially if you're working and you're using your payslip, for me, the rule of the thumb is that you should not commit your payslip to the extent that you cannot live your life or you cannot pay your other bills. And regardless of whatever you are buying with that kind of investments, unless you are doing a leverage to create another class of income, if you are committing your payslip to the extent that you can't do anything else, you can't pay your rent, you can't pay school fees for your children, you can't buy food, you have to borrow to pay those things, then you are living a dangerous life in terms of debt. For me, the rule of the thumb is that do not commit more than 1/3 of your net of your pay after statutory deduction to debt, because you might be calculating your debt repayment when you have already committed the debt. So make sure you have at least 2/3 of your income so that you are able to live your other life as you leverage on debt. So that's for me, the rule of the thumb. No more than 1/3 of your payslip if you're using a payslip. Now, the problem with debt, it is one of the biggest factors that is causing stress. We have seen people even get to depression because of debt. And I think there's a lot of public information right now. We have had people who have committed suicide because they took too much debt. They don't know what to do with their debts. Other people took debts. They went to bed. They have lost the money. We have had people commit suicide. We have had people even do things to their families that are not supposed to be done. But also, it affects your productivity. When you are stressed and immersed in debt, then it means that you cannot work well in your workplace. Some people even end up losing their job because they cannot perform because of the stress that is created by debt. So do not push debt to put you into a crisis. Now, there's something about giving, and I'll speak about it especially in the Kenyan context. Now, all over the world, and there's a lot of literature, if you check any book on personal finance and wealth creation, they will tell you about the secret of giving. Now, there's nobody who knows exactly why, but what you give comes back. For Kenyan context, I want to make a distinction. There is what we call black tax, and there's giving. The two are very different. Giving is when you give to a worthy cause. Okay? You give from your heart, you pay school fees for a child you do not know, and you give them and you don't want anything from it. Actually, some of us even give and they start taking photos, putting it on social media and all that. So that's not the kind of giving I'm talking about. When you're paying black tax, you are not giving. For example, when you're paying school fees for your relative, that is simply black tax. That's not the kind of giving we are talking about. Or when you are contributing in WhatsApp group weddings, that is not giving. That is black tax. The money that we give in rural shows, matangas, and all that, they are not giving, they are black tax. Now, black tax is not what is giving. Giving is where you give genuinely for a worthy cause, and you don't expect anything in return. And actually, sometimes you give without even being known who gave that. That is the kind of giving that we talk about. Now, most of the wealthy people, they identify the areas of interest. For example, you go to Bill Gates Foundation, they have already identified the issues that they fund. They find issues on HIV, health, and other factors. And they'll never give outside what they have identified. And you find Bill Gates has said, out of my wealth, this component go to the foundation, and the foundation is the one that deals with it. Actually, most of the time, you'll never know who benefits from that. So that's the kind of giving we are talking about. So distinguish between black tax and giving. Now, this other one I will say with a heavy heart. Be very careful, especially in the Kenyan context right now. There's a lot of religious exploitation in the name of giving. And I normally keep on saying, and I've had a bit of my own personal experiences, in places of worship, it's where you can find most of the most exploitative people financially in the Kenyan context. So we need to be a bit careful. I'm not saying you don't give to the church or to the place of worship where you go, but give according to scripture. It is you to exercise your spirit of discernment and give as scripture directs you. Unfortunately, we are having a lot of places of worship where people are being manipulated and exploited financially, not according to scripture. So when you give to places of worship, please make sure you understand what scripture says about giving. And when you give, most of the places of worship, or what scripture talks about, when you give, you are not supposed, the left hand is not supposed to know the right hand. But when you're being coerced, you're being manipulated, whether they are fundraisers or whatever it is, we need to be very careful and distinguish between giving according to scripture and when you're being exploited. So this is something that is a bit deeply entrenched in the Kenyan culture. Unfortunately, we have very many false preachers. The scripture talks about them. So be very careful. Now, the other thing about giving, one of the biggest words that you can get or you can learn and teach yourself is to say no. When you give, please create budgets. Many of the time, we do not factor what we give in our planning. So decide. The many books of personal finance and development, they tell you set aside 10% of your income for giving. The moment you will give the 10%, do not hesitate to say no if you must say no. Many of us give out of pity or simply because you feel you are cornered. Please learn to say no. Unfortunately, and this you can test and check for yourself, many people who keep on asking you for money, they will ask and ask and ask. Today they will ask, tomorrow they will ask, the other day they will ask, and they never seem to get out of problems. Now, you can never solve the problem of anybody in terms of money. The moment somebody is 18 years and above, the rules of nature expect that they should earn their bread and their living. So do not lie to yourself that you can give to the extent of solving somebody's problems. Even for your own children, those of us who have children, you cannot even solve the problems of money for your children. So give where you can and what you can. Where you can't, simply say no. Or else choose where you give. And what is not aligned to where you give, then say no. And this is one of the biggest words that you can learn. Anyway, people will still complain. Even when you give, you might give 1,000, somebody thinks, you should, this a rich person should have given me 5,000. People will still complain. So give what you can and where you can. Now, I will speak about enemies of wealth. And these have been proved. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of evidence about it. Some of them we are seeing them in our debate right now. There's a lot of debate about gambling and betting. So there are a lot of documentation. If you look at the book on Think and Grow Rich, they have talked about some of these enemies of money. Drugs and substance abuse. If you are addicted to drugs and substance abuse, those ones will destroy your wealth or your wealth journey. Gambling and betting. I know right now it's a live debate. The newspapers from last week, they are talking about it. We have heard about people, friends, relatives who have committed suicide. I hear people talk about Aviator. I don't know how it works, and many other gambling places. These have been known to destroy wealth. Addiction to sex. Now, if you look at Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, he says this is the strongest emotions of human beings. In fact, he says the sex part is the most strongest emotion of human being. But the moment you get addicted to it, most likely to destroy your wealth. And there's a lot of documentation about this. We have had very rich people get destroyed because of their addictions or bad habits around that. The other thing is about culture. Many of us have poverty mentality and primitive culture. And I will speak about this. For example, many of us abuse our friends. For example, if I've been called to a Harambee by, like in my place of worship, it doesn't mean that I have to drink everybody that I know. And then it doesn't mean that everything I have something small, I have to drink people in our WhatsApp group. And there are very many people who have gotten into that habit. Where simply because we are on the same WhatsApp group, simply because we're in the same Tama, we are simply in the same forums or in the same workplace, you tend to feel that you should be dragging everybody to your activities. So you need to be careful how you engage with your people and your friends. And many of us have poverty habits where you get something small, you're rushing to create a WhatsApp group. This is a poverty habit, and such habits are enemies of wealth. Now, I talk about angels of wealth and demons of poverty. Now, this is how it works. By nature, the way the nature and God has created the world, there will be opportunities that will come to you that give you opportunity to make money and wealth. Now, immediately, there will be another voice. For example, I'll use this slide because we use it in the Kenyan case. When people get like a windfall gain, maybe you've been paid your bonus. This is money you didn't expect, or you didn't know how much it will be, and then you're paid your bonus. For some people, they will say, wacha nipite hapa kwa Njuguna nikate ushuru, ama nirudishie mwili shukurani. And when you sit on that table, before you leave that table, you find the bonus is gone. Or you get an activity that you had not planned for, and it brings you money. And then, for example, you get a trip to Mombasa, and when you get to Mombasa, ideas start coming to your head. Or which classmate went to Mombasa? You have not talked to this person for 20 years. Then you start looking for them to enjoy a drink or a meal. And before you realize it, the money that you earned has gone. Those are the ones I call demons of poverty. And they're normally very noisy. They look very cool. Wacha nirudishie mwili shukrani. Those terms, most of the time, they are the ones I call demons of poverty. You'll be given an opportunity, you'll be given a windfall gain, but then ideas to spend that money comes. But always, there's normally a small voice somewhere behind the background telling you, this money I can invest. This money I can do something. But you ignore that voice. There's normally a very small voice. That's what we call angels of wealth. Then the other demons of poverty Like, for example, I've not talked about savings directly in this discussion, but I've talked about investing. Now, if you check on most of the social media, many people are saying, why should I start saving 5,000? When will I ever get 100,000? When will I ever reach 1,000,000? Now, when we are discussing that, if I save 5,000, it tells you in a year, I'll have only saved 60,000. So you don't start. Those are the demons of poverty, because now you are doing it in your head. I will take 1 year to save 60,000 only. But it doesn't tell you that what I just talked about, compounding. If I save the 50,000, I can invest the 50,000 in an incumbent bond and start compounding. So you don't start, 1 year ends, next year ends, that year ends, 5th year ends, 10 years end, you still didn't start. Now the person who started with the 5,000, by that time is much, much ahead in terms of the money that is working for you compared to you who didn't start. So those are the things that we call angels of wealth and demons of poverty. There's another secret about money that nobody knows why, but it is true. We normally say money attracts more money. For example, I normally say it is a crime to be completely broke. And you can test this whether it's true because you might have seen it. The day you are completely broke, the day you have nothing in your pocket, is when you get to your house, the gas gets finished. You get to your house, stima inaisha. You get to your house, unaambiwa hakuna maji. But if you have 1,000 shilling, you can even walk around the whole of this city for a whole day and don't even feel hungry. So there's a secret about money. If you're somewhere, it attracts more money. Those of us who are Christian, the Bible tells us, those who have, more will be added unto them. And those who do not have, even the little they have, will be taken and given to those who have. It is a mystery about money and wealth that many people ignore. Now, the last part I'll be speaking about is, what is wealth? How does it look like? I see it in your personal GDP. I said money is a tool. So never think negative about money. You should be proud when you have money. When you have friends who have money, you should be grateful. That which you appreciate, that which you give gratitude multiplies. But the moment you start seeing money in the negative, then it will also run from you. The other thing about money, wealth is when money is working for you. It doesn't matter how much you are paid to work for money. If, for example, I'm paid 1,000,000 and I have to work to earn that million, it is less powerful compared to an investment that brings me 100,000. The investment or the money that brings me 100,000 is more powerful than the million that I have to work for. Because it means if I will not be able to work, the million will not come. But if money is generating me the 100,000, whether I work or not, whether I'm sick or not, it will still generate that money. So when you have enough money and a lot of money working for you, then that is what we call wealth. Money does not get tired, it doesn't get sick, it doesn't retire. If you have money working for you, you have what we even call generational wealth. The other thing that we call wealth is how much you are able to compound. I said, if I put 100,000 somewhere, it brings me 10,000. I take back the 10,000, it brings me 110,000. I take back the 110,000, it brings me 150,000. That is how you create wealth. Over time, the compounding brings more than you even started with or you save. So you should be proud when you're compounding. So do not rush to eat the children of your money. Do not rush to eat the grandchildren of your money. Do not rush to eat the great-grandchildren of your money. If you can, put them back and see the miracle of compounding. The other thing about wealth is about generational wealth. Many of us live through what we call generational poverty. Your parents were poor. You live a mediocre life. You pass that poverty to your children. Your children live a mediocre life. They pass that poverty to their grandchildren. You should stick to cut what I call generational poverty. So if you are there, you are in good health, you have ability, you can think, you can work with your hands, please try to cut generational poverty. Do not allow poverty to be passed from you your children. For example, those of us who work, I keep on saying your children is not your retirement strategy. Your parents might have invested in you so that you can take care of them in their old age. You should not allow your children to take care of you in your old age. It is you to prepare for your old age and cut that generational poverty. The other thing that I will talk about is about understanding the economic system that we work in. And I will start with the social capital. Who are your friends? Who are your friends? If you check many books, they will tell you if you hang out with 5 millionaires, you most likely be the sixth one. Kama kazi yako ni kuenda kwa Njugunas, munakaa pale, muna complain vile uchumi iko mbaya, you are going to be the next complainant. You should seek to grow quality friends. You rather have 3 friends who are able to pass opportunities to you, or who are able to say, this one belongs to my friend, not me. They can do it, but they are able to pass it over. At certain levels, we say your social capital is your network. Your friends define who you are. And that's why you see when people who know where they're going, they start shedding off certain friends and you start complaining. It's simply because they feel you are not aligned with their vision and with where they are going. So do not be happy when you are hanging with people who cannot create opportunities for you. So be very careful on your investing. Now, this one, the other one I've not talked about it, I've not put it in the slides, but I will talk about it. Many of us underestimate the economic environment that we work in. For example, if you are Kenyan and you live here in Kenya, unless you're involved in investing online investments in other countries, you can only make money in Kenya. You need to start thinking about taxes. And different investment bring different classes of taxes. So you cannot be growing wealth and you are not mindful of where you put your investment. You start understanding about taxes. And that's why I said, you can never grow beyond your capacity. So the moment you start making real money, taxes become a big factor. Because if you're not careful, you can make the money and all the money goes to the government in taxes. So it's you to start investing and understanding taxation. When I talk about financial assets, for example, I've not tried to break down what fixed assets, what treasury bills, what stocks are. The expectations are that if you're really looking for money, you need to start understanding that language. When people talk about treasury bills, when people talk about treasury bonds, when people talk about special funds, when people talk about money market funds, if you're really looking for money, you need to know what those terms are. And that's why I've not gone to the details of explaining to them. You need to invest in knowing what those things are, because you cannot be looking for money and you do not know what a money market is. You cannot be looking for money and you don't understand what a treasury bill is. You cannot be looking for money and you don't understand the difference between a fixed account and a savings account and a current account. So when you're looking for wealth, you must invest your knowledge to understand the language of money and wealth. And that is very important. And that's what I'll be concluding with. This quote I got from one of the books I've been reading this year. And somebody says, books open worlds that money can't buy. Every book opens a new door. Wealth is not just earned, it is learned. Thank you. This is my book. Over to you, Elias and Dot.
Yeah,
For the
so thank you.
questions and the plenary.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harry. I must say that that was a powerful presentation. It reminded me of the generous person every time will prosper. And we are told that whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. So Dr. Harry, I've taken my piece, and we've seen what is going around in the media about gambling and all that. You've said it so well. So allow me to take a few questions from the chat. And then so I will read 2 and then you respond to those. So there's the first question that This was from this question was from Rotich Caleb, and he was like, "Is employment an investment?" But it raised so there was a response that Daniel was like, "I think employment is return from investment in your studies." So the question there was, is employment an investment? And somebody would say, is education an investment? There was also a question from Winnie Munene. If I have a house and I'm not paying rent or mortgage, can that be termed as an asset? So yes, you have a house, you bought this house through a mortgage, you're not currently paying rent. Can this be termed as an asset? But of course, Anne mentioned that an asset is one that generates cash flow, which for this particular house that Winnie was talking about, currently it's not generating cash flows. So, and my last question, so that you can respond, Dr. is there's a question from Amina Mohammed. What is your thought on Mansaks? So, Dr. you can take the three questions as we proceed.
Okay, thank you. Is employment investment? No. Now, that's why I talked about active income and passive incomes. When you're working, you must work for you to earn. Okay? Now, the twist about employment is that it's very difficult to find an employer who pays you towards wealth. Employers pay you to give you a livelihood and sustainability. Unfortunately, in the current modern economic systems, the thing that we used to call permanent and pensionable is almost becoming a mystery or a myth. We have seen people being retrenched left, right, center. We have seen even people with organizations that were very stable. For example, you look at what happened with USAID and all that. So when I'm talking about investments, is when you start creating assets. So the employment is a means towards where you want to go. And that's why we normally say, if I'm employed, the rule of the thumb is I should set aside 10% to save and invest. So, for example, when I get my salary, and my salary, I'm not talking about the net pay. If, for example, I've already taken loans, I'm not talking about the 10% is not what is left after you pay the loan. It is what is left after you pay taxes, share, housing levy, and pay. So the rule of the thumb is that if you're employed, you need to start setting aside part of what you earn. That's what we normally say, pay yourself. And what you pay yourself, you start now moving it to investment that work for you. Now, when I talk about the 10%, it's what I normally emphasize that you put in investment that preserve the capital. So that one is not the money you start going to gamble in stock markets or forex and all that. So you need to put that kind of investments in places where it preserves the original capital, but it starts generating, and then you start focusing on compounding. So employment income is a means. So it is not true that you cannot create wealth from employment, but you need to start paying yourself from the employment income. And I say, no matter how much you're paid, as long as you're only relying on the payment or the pay, then you cannot create wealth. And I said, you rarely find anybody base your salary to create wealth. So you need to start paying yourself from the employment income. So if you're employed, pay yourself. And the rule of the thumb is at minimum, start with 10%. If you are not already doing it, the time to start is now, not tomorrow. Okay, the month is ending next week. Some of us have already been paid. If you have not been paying yourself, the time to start is now. Now, I normally say it doesn't matter how much you start with. What you need to do is to create the habit. So what you need to overcome is creating the habit of saving. Even if you can only afford 100, start with the 100. Over time, it will increase and then you get to the habit. Now, the issue of house and you're not paying rent, and especially when you're talking about mortgage, in Kenya, you need to be very careful. Now, when you talk about certain money products or facilities or loan facilities, they very much depend on the environment where you are in. For example, I use the Kenyan case. Mortgage rates, if you go to the banks, they are giving mortgage at maybe 12, 13, 14, 15%. The Kenya mortgage refinance is the one that is under the affordable housing. They are giving the mortgage at 9.5%, but that is fixed interest rate. It's a fixed interest rate. It's not the reducing balance. If you understand what fixed interest rate, you are still getting that mortgage at around 17, 18% on a reducing balance. Now, ask me, in Kenya, what investment can you do to get a return on investment of more than 17%, more than it can pay the entire cost, even the mortgage we use for commercial houses. For example, if I take a loan and I put it in a commercial house, I take a mortgage and I put it in a house that I'm renting, but the rent I'm collecting is less than what I'm paying for that mortgage, that is still a bad loan. It is only a good loan if the loan I took, the rent I'm collecting is able to pay the entire loan together with its costs and leave me with a profit. That mortgage now I can live with. And that's what I'm saying. In Kenya, interest rates are very high. It is very difficult to make a profit from mortgage rates that we have in Kenya. It's the same case with buying plots. Many of us think that when you take a loan and buy a plot, you have already made a good investment decision. It is not always correct. Because you might find by the time you finish paying, because many of us only see the money they paid the owner of the plot. If, for example, I took a loan and I paid a plot for 2 million. Now, in my mind, I paid 2 million only. But I forget this was borrowed money. So by the time I finish paying a loan of 2 million, I'll have probably paid 3.2 million because the interest will be more than a million by the time I'm finished paying that loan. So the plot did not cost me 2 million. It cost me 2 million plus the interest. So when I start selling that plot for 3 million, I'm still making loss compared to the loan facility that I used. Now, let me talk about mortgages. Like if I take a mortgage, many of us, like you can be offered, you might find the house you are taking a mortgage to do, like most mortgages in Kenya, if I take a mortgage of 10 million, most likely I'll be repaying about 120,000. Okay? I buy a house whose rent is, say, 60,000. So that decision is already a bad financial decision. Because what I've done is that I've converted, and that mortgage I'm going to pay for 15 or 20 years. So what I've done is I've taken a mortgage, but converted my rent of 60,000 to 120,000. Okay, so what I've simply done is like I've doubled. For 20 years, I'll be paying a mortgage. Now, many of us have the idea that I will eventually own the house. But imagine if this 60,000 extra I'm paying, if I've started putting that money in an investment and start compounding, it means that over time, I can actually buy the house, or the house becomes cheaper if I live on rent. So this idea that you must own a house, and that's what we're talking about cultural, emotional stereotypes. So when you're making investment, do not bring your emotions there. Evaluate the financial implication on their own. So it's not true that every time you get a mortgage, simply because you're eventually going to own the house or you're going to save on rent, that you're making a right financial decision. Some mortgages can be good investments if the payment is less than the money you are generating from that investment. Now, the question of Mansa X and all that, I talked about classes of investment. There's a lot of myths about these investments. Now, when I talk about money market, like for example, a lot of social media discussion in the last like 2 years, most of January, February, and March, because last year, most of the money market paid a lot of a very huge interest. And then many people are saying, I would rather buy a money market than buy a treasury bonds. Now, these are people who do not understand investments. Now, money market cannot pay more than the underlying asset. Where does money market put the investment? They put the investment in either fixed bank accounts or treasury bills. So when the treasury bills come down, like now the treasury bills have come down, automatically the money market fund will not give you the kind of return that they gave last year. So they were giving those high returns the last year and the last year but one, because the assets where they invest in the money are also paying high returns. So there's an underlying asset. So we need to start understanding this product. So Mansa X And there are quite a lot of funds now. There's NIBO, there's Manza X, there's OC. There are quite a number of them. Now, for these special funds, they are simply a class of investment which is slightly more risky, and they're giving returns. Okay, so the risk is a bit high, and of course you expect them to pay more because they are more risky compared to the others. So it is not a bad investment, but it doesn't guarantee that you cannot lose money because this is an investment like any other. So what you need to understand is sorry, who is Eckhart?
Yeah, I'm trying to mute. Sorry for that.
Okay. Sorry. So these are classes of investment. So there's nothing wrong with those investments. You just need to understand what class of investment it is. Now, for those funds, what you need to know is that you need to check where they are regulated. They are the genuine ones. Unfortunately, in our market, they also have the fake ones. Like there was the Cyton fund. There were funds of Cyton ones that were regulated. There were others that were not regulated. Okay, so people who lost money were the ones in the fund that were not regulated. So if you are doing those special funds, whether it's Manza, whether it's NIBO, whether it's OC or whatever it is, you need to go to the Central Market Authority and check whether they are listed. Even the money market, the MMFs, before you put your money in an MMF and you're putting it in Kenya, go and check whether it is among the ones that are approved by the Capital Markets Authority, because they are the ones who regulate those. So once you find them, they are listed there, the controls and checks and balances are a bit more as opposed to the ones that are open. Thank you. I think I've responded to the 3 questions. We can pick another one.
Yes, so thank you, Dr. So there's a question from Lillian. Is between money market fund and fixed deposit. So between money market fund and fixed deposit, which one should be preferred? And then there's a question from Josephat. Is building a home in the village a debt capital? So maybe you can take those, Dr.
Okay, thank you. Now, money market and fixed deposits. What I said, they are largely related. It all depends with what you want to achieve. Now, in fixed deposit, you're simply doing it, going to your bank and you're fixing your money there. If you use fixed deposit, it will largely pay you, like right now, in terms of performance, the interest from the banks is slightly less than what the money markets are paying. But in the fixed deposit, once you fix it, for example, 1 year, it means that your money is locked for 1 year. So you cannot withdraw it within that 1 year. So if you fix the money in a fixed deposit, the interest most likely will be slightly less. And that's what we call the return on investment. But then it means you can't access your money. Now, for money market, many of them gives you a bit of flexibility. So you can either buy in smaller quantities, some pay as less as 1,000, 3,000, and then you can withdraw the money within a short time. But the return is likely the same because money market normally invests the money in fixed deposits, treasury bills, and all that. So when you're doing money market, you need to know money market is based on, we normally call it underlying asset. There is an investment where the money market is put. So the money you put in your money market, it is invested by the fund manager in an asset under that. But because money market pull money from many other people, it allows you flexibility. So you can easily access your money compared to fixed deposit. So there is no one that gives you advantage over the other. What you need to understand is what is the objective? What do I want this money for? For example, if I have 1 million, I want to keep it for 1 year. And after 1 year, I will need to use it for a particular item that I will need to pay at that time. Instead of keeping it in my current account or where I can use it, then I can fix it. Okay, I can fix it. And then after, when I need the money, it will be ready. So I can fix it for the duration. In the same case with, if, for example, I want to put that money in a treasury bond. In the treasury bond, when I put the money there, I'll earn interest, but I'll not be able to get the principal until the bond is mature, or unless the bond is traded in the stock market, where I can sell it for either profit or for loss. So it is about understanding the objective and the purpose why you need to do that. So these products, I said you need to start investing in understanding them and knowing them. The good thing with the financial products and issues about money, you don't need to have gone to a school of business. You don't need to have done BCom. You don't need to have done business. You don't need to have done economics to understand these issues of money. You just need to create time. There's a lot of videos. There are a lot of videos on YouTube, on TikTok. There are a lot of people who are talking about it for free. Even this webinar, it is for free, and we are talking about these products. So it's very easy to know them, and you don't need sometimes even to start paying people to do it for you. Like when you're trying to buy government bonds and bills, you don't need to use brokers to do that. You just need to go to central bank. They tell you how to open the account, and then from that you just need to know when to buy and when to sell. So financial issues of financial education, they are available to anybody, and anybody can learn and understand. So this is the beauty of financial education. Anybody, regardless of your technical background, whether you're an engineer, whether you are a doctor, issues of money are basic knowledge that anybody can acquire. And actually, that's why I said you need to invest in your education. Now, issues of building a house in your rural home. It really doesn't matter whether you're building it in your rural home or you're building it in a town. The houses that you're building, I said, you don't see them as assets. As long as it's your house for use, you see it as a lifestyle choice. For example, I might live in Nairobi and I want to retire in my rural home. So I can prepare for my retirement in my rural home by putting up the house I want when I retire in the rural home. Or maybe I have things I do in my rural home, so I'm frequent there. And when I go there, I need a place to live in. Sometimes it's purely because of culture. Like many of the people, they come from backgrounds where a man must have a Simba. Okay? So when I'm building that house, whether it's in the city or in the rural home, I do not see it as an investment. So I will not call it a debt capital. I will simply call it a lifestyle choice. So the money I spend in that house, I know it is not an investment. It is a house to meet a different need. And the need is for me a place to sleep. It doesn't matter how much money I put in that house. It will never be an asset for as long as it's a house for living. Okay, so that's how I will see it. I said I don't want to say they are bad things to do. I simply call them lifestyle choices. Some of us we want a holiday home in our village. So I can build a house in the village, seeing it as like a holiday home. In Nairobi, I can choose to build a very nice house because I want to live well. And I said there's nothing wrong with enjoying life. Of course, when you're making money, you need to enjoy your money, but you need also to create wealth. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you.
You can take some
Thank you,
more
Dr.
if you have time.
Yeah, I can see we are past the time, 9:30. I think those were the key questions that I picked. Yeah, so thank you, Daktari, for the presentation. It was really, I mean, it was really encouraging, and I'm seeing this book, and I'm like, I need to call you and get to know where I can easily buy this book. Yeah, so but thank you, That was really it was really touching. So without taking much time, I can see we are 4 minutes on top of the planned time. Allow me to welcome the managing partner for the closing remarks. Welcome,
Okay.
Dot.
Thank you, Eliasa, and thank you very much, Daktari. I'm always learning new things every time I attend our session. So today I've learned that actually there's a basis for the money market fund, and it is affected by the underlying items. However, that it will give me liquidity to be able to access my money anytime I would want to earn it. So that's my take home for today, and that I need to change my mental attitude so that I attract, or rather so that I have a good money culture or personality. So these are lessons I keep learning, and I already have Daktari's book. I would encourage you to read it as well. And this is because it touches on us, specifically with our backgrounds as Kenyans. Asante sana, Daktari. We are happy to keep sharing this information and these opportunities with all of us so that we learn from the best in the market and from people who are actually trying it out there. we can't keep talking about audit all the time or risk all the time. Sometimes we also need to take care of ourselves so that we are better humans as we go out there. So without taking much more time, as already past time, just to say thank you and to remind you that we are doing this through Dorte&Associates. Like we said at the beginning, we are a consulting firm that offers consulting services in relation to governance, risk management, control, compliance, and we also offer capacity building in those areas. We do outsourced internal audits, and you're welcome to reach out to us through our emails, you can reach out to either Eliasa or myself through the chat, and we keep the conversation going. So I would just like to give 1 minute to our facilitator for today to just give us his parting shot so that we close our session. Thank you. Dr. Harry, your parting shot.
Thank you. I will just close with a very simple statement. And because I talk about money and wealth, I want to close with this statement saying that there is no honor or glory in poverty. You should never be proud to talk about poverty. We have been placed here for a purpose and for a reason. And the scripture tells us we should be fruitful and we should multiply. So do not plan or purpose to be poor. There is no honor in poverty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harry. Indeed, there is no honor in poverty, and ours is to try and work hard with the many tips you've given us in trying to actually build wealth and create value for ourselves and those around us. So, good people, it's time to come to the end of our presentation. Look out for our next session, and the topic will, next month, we are going into the month where we celebrate internal auditors, where we talk about the good work that internal auditors do. So, we'll focus more on internal audit in the month of May, and we will keep discussing your understanding of this activity, your understanding of internal audit. First, there's a very good pillar for good corporate governance because it continues to give you assurance that whatever structures you put in place for governance, for risk management, control, compliance are actually happening as they should. So tune into our activities in May. We'll have more because it's the May Awareness Month. We'll have more sessions, perhaps every week, and we'll be focusing on specific topics to just build awareness about the work we do as internal auditors and to teach us how we can actually leverage the prowess or the skill that internal auditors has. We can actually discuss more of how you can consult them, how you can have them, and understand the value that it adds to organizations. So look out for activities in May, and of course in the continuing engagements, look out to what we do on a continuing basis and keep engaging and we keep learning together. So from us to you, have a good night and see you next last Thursday of the month. Thank you and good night.
Thank you and good night.